So I want to show you a picture of the little boy who's my inspiration, and he and his siblings that you're going to hear a lot about tonight. So this is Hamza, Omar, Hazrian. So this is my little sweet baby that I'll be talking about tonight. He does have two older siblings, Firdaus and Firas, who I hope are listening right now, and I did not post their pictures because I did not get clearance in advance. So you know how that goes with teenagers. We cannot post pictures without permission. So that is why you don't see them. So I'm not going to leave this up here the whole time. I just wanted you to be introduced to who I'm going to be speaking about. So I think with this topic, what I want to really start out with is just, have you ever noticed that with heavy things, with hard things, we tend not to talk about it? We think that maybe it's going to hurt that person or it'll hurt ourselves in some way. But what I want to take away from this tonight is that when we actually hold those thoughts and feelings close and not share it, it actually makes grief harder. And grief is a lot like those topics that we don't talk about in certain circles. And we don't talk about it because it's not there. It definitely is, but usually because it just feels too raw, too heavy, too awkward. And silence, though, doesn't erase our grief. It only pushes it into shadows, into whispers carried in the dark, and it makes the loneliness that comes with grief that much harder. So for me, grief became real when my youngest son, Hamza, died. That loss reshaped me in ways I still struggle to put into words. And yet grief is broader than death alone. You, me, we, all of us are carrying grief of some sort or another. Right now, we grieve when the season of parenting changes, when the beloved child that we raised gets married or steps into a life of their own. We grieve endings, like finishing school, finishing college, or moving on from a place that we loved. And sometimes grief is losing a friendship, maybe to distance, to misunderstanding, or even to drama. We grieve in the weight of chronic illness in our living children. We grieve miscarriages, stillbirths, parental loss, spousal loss, and divorce. So all of that has grief, and it touches every single person in this room and online that's listening to this. So even though I'm going to share my story, please know that I honor and give space to the grief that all of us are experiencing as we speak. I think the common thread, though, in all of this is that grief does begin with love. We can't be sad for something if it didn't start from a place of wanting and liking that, and that is in fact the purpose of our talk here today. And when we don't talk about what we love and that grief, it actually makes it harder and heavier. But when we name it, when we discuss it like we are right now, and hopefully you're thinking about what resonates with you, it becomes something that we can actually carry together. And I love speaking about Hamza. His story is heavy, but it's also full of love. Because my grief is love just without a physical child to catch it. And tonight I want to talk about grief, but not only mine, but the many ways that we all live it, as I mentioned earlier. And of course, I just want to say that what I share is my opinion and my experience, and in no way does it reflect MCC or anyone listening today who actually knows me personally. So first, let me introduce you a little bit to Hamza and the life that he had. So grief exists in death, of course, but Hamza was also very sick, and that grief is another kind altogether. To help you understand me in this moment, I want to share some memories with you, because grief is tied to death, yes, but it stretches far beyond it, and the memories don't end when physical life ends. So let's backtrack with me for a minute to October 2013. At that time, I had a 10-year-old daughter, Firdaus, and a 7-year-old son, Firas. And they had been asking for a younger sibling for years. And as my belly grew, and anyone who's had a baby can attest to this or is experiencing it now can attest to this, the excitement also grew. But there are limits to what can be shared with others. Some things are secrets just between me and the baby in my womb. So even if I tried to explain, the magic of it would get lost in translation because I had already met the baby long before anybody else had laid eyes on him. I met him through his kicks, through his punches, his movements, and even his hiccups. On July 7, 2014, Hamza came into the world. He was strong. He was my biggest baby yet. 8 pounds, 2.2 ounces, and the 0.2 is very important. At just 21 days old, I took him for a routine checkup with his physician. You know, he'd been doing fine, feeding, growing, all the good things. And the pediatrician told me it was probably nothing, but she heard a slight heart murmur. I don't know what a slight heart murmur means, but just to be safe, she asked us to see a cardiologist first thing in the morning. At the cardiologist's office, everything shifted. Hamza's heart rate spiked, his oxygen dropped, and the doctor sat us down and explained that Hamza had only half a heart. No rhyme to it, no reason. He told us that Hamza would need several surgeries, but that he could and would survive, that this is not that uncommon. In fact, 1 in 100 children is born with a heart defect. But I was confused. Surely you got it wrong, I told the doctor. Hamza was just fine this morning. My son is fine. But the doctor was calm, steady, and certain. His colleagues at the Children's Hospital confirmed what he saw. Okay, I said, let's get Hamza to the hospital then. I started to buckle my baby into his car seat, and the doctor gently tapped my arm and said no. I have an ambulance waiting outside to take him to the hospital. And in that instant, in that cardiologist's office, our lives changed forever. July 29, 2014. Hospital room 5123 has become our home. It was there that I learned that in the world of medical diagnoses, truth and associated action plans change. Hamza's heart muscle was so trabeculated that he didn't qualify for the surgeries we had been promised. I was given 2 choices, palliative care or wait for a heart transplant. I chose the transplant, and so we waited. And all the while, I was begging God, begging him to sift through my register of deeds, to search for anything good I may have done, and just take it in exchange for my son's health, to cure him, to take away his pain. I bargained a lot with God. Eventually, Hamza did receive a heart transplant. It was not lost on me that another family somewhere lost a child so that my son could get a transplant, but I think that's another type of grief that I'll save for another day. And with that transplant came numerous caths, biopsies, procedures, x-rays, balloons, and 2 more open heart surgeries. Each one carried hope, but each one also carried pain. January 12, 2015. He was still so young that I could feel his phantom kicks. But on this day at the hospital, I just spent hours watching my 6-month-old baby fight for something that should come naturally, breathing. Hamza was exhausted. He couldn't get comfortable. He couldn't sleep. No matter how I held him, tangled in his many wires, there was no relief. His little mouth was parched. He was nourished only through his feeding tube. So I dipped his binky in water again and again, bringing it to his cracked lips, moistening his tiny tongue. And he knew what was coming. As soon as he saw the binky come near, he would open wide and pant as if to say, "Give me binky water now." I think we take that for granted, just a sip of water. Hamza was not a baby who cried often, but on this day he cried. He couldn't get comfortable. He couldn't breathe. He couldn't sleep. And all I could do was just watch. All I could do was try to comfort him. I had mastered helpless parenting, and in that helplessness, I bargained with God again, pleading for just 1 moment of ease for him, 1 breath of peace for my son so he could sleep that day. March 2nd, 2015. I lived each moment balanced between Hamza's life and his death. 1 second, I was imagining his first day of kindergarten. The next, I was trying to picture his face without a feeding tube. One moment I was crying because I couldn't imagine how I would even breathe at his funeral. And the next, I was pushing the thought aside, convincing myself that he would be fine, that I would see him at his wedding someday. I signed up his older brother and sister for piano and violin lessons, already wondering which instrument would Hamza choose. One second I was missing him, and the next I was basking in his toothless grin, dreaming of his first words, and maybe hearing the pitter-patter of his feet hitting the wood floors that we had installed in the house just for him. But it's hard to plan a future when you're standing on the edge of a cliff. No one really plans a life while you're falling down. And life felt like it was on pause, with literal shallow breaths for him and figurative shallow breaths for me. How could my baby, who looked so perfect on the outside, be so broken on the inside? I hated coming home to a house without him. His swing sat empty. His feeding tube stood in a silent corner, waiting to be useful, and I tried. I tried to be strong for his brother and sister. I tried to smile for their sake, even when I felt no strength inside. And in those moments of pretending, of falling, of shallow breaths, I bargained with God again, pleading for a future that didn't feel suspended in midair and normalcy for my kids. March 10th, 2015. I'm standing in medical rounds with a group of doctors as a young resident presents Hamza's case again. He's not a case I want to yell, but instead I nod as the resident recites my child's medical history. TAPFAR increases oxygen, the resident says. And I'm thinking, Hamza likes his binky and he loves his green dinosaur. BMP levels, magnesium levels are off, the resident reports. And I'm thinking, Hamza's kicking his legs these days. Tacro numbers, MPO, feeding tube, the resident continues. And I'm thinking, Hamza's favorite book is Goodnight Moon. I soak in the medical information, trying to understand it all, trying to keep my knees from buckling while my brain runs in the background like a blender without an off button. And I wonder if Firdaus and Firas are okay at school. Did they eat breakfast? Did they have clean clothes when they left the house that morning? And in the chaos of monitors, numbers, and charts, I bargain with God again, pleading for Hamza's health amid the machines and the medicine. March 26, 2015. Tomorrow, Hamza gets to come home. We've been through 5 hospitalizations in 8 months. Each discharge brought relief, but this one feels different. I can't swallow my joy this time. I think of the families that are still in the rooms next to me, holding vigil on uncomfortable sofas, going to work bleary-eyed, carrying on for literally a fight for life. I had been spared this road until Hamza, and now I see how many mothers had already cried the same tears, lost the same dreams, while gaining some others long before I did. Back in July, when Hamza was first admitted, I couldn't stop crying. I tried to stand in those medical rounds and focus on the doctor's words. I was an English teacher, but I had no idea what they were talking about or how to help Hamza. And I was just willing my knees not to buckle as I listened to them. I watched other parents and I wondered, how do they do it? Why aren't they crying? How can they breathe, let alone smile? And I thought I was weak. But now I know that strength looks different for everyone. It became a new normal, and in this normal, the unimaginable somehow becomes bearable. For this moment, my baby's healing. Tomorrow, I can sleep next to him at home. For now, I can exhale. But I still see the humanity in others, those parents whose babies fought bravely and those kids still passed away, families I will never meet, doctors and nurses who give their hearts daily. Hamza's cardiologist, for example, he stood 7 hours in a cath lab performing chest compressions and procedures on my son so I could have my baby home. His transplant surgeon comes in very early, stays late, always bringing hope. The nurses, the managers, the child life people, they listen, they feel, they act with love. I mean, these medical professionals are just amazing. So yes, tomorrow I bring my baby home. And I'm deeply grateful, as difficult as it is, but I would never trade my beautiful, perfect baby. And I believe that any parent can relate to that. June 5th, 2015, Hamza was admitted to the hospital again by ambulance. Though his heart transplant had been successful, he also had pulmonary vein stenosis. It's like a cancer, and it's treated with cancer medications, but it's so rare there isn't enough research to actually classify it as a cancer. And Hamza's was a very aggressive form. I knew this would be his last hospital stay. The plan was to take him home for hospice and palliative care on Monday, June 22nd. But we didn't make it home. On June 21st, the doctors and the nurses placed Hamza in my arms, without any wires this time. I held him, his face ashen, barely able to breathe. He looked at me and said, "Mama," and then took his last breath in the morning, just like he had taken his first breath. I now have a sign on Hamza's memory wall that my daughter made, and it reads, "First word mama, last word mama." And I did the last worldly thing I could do for him. I washed his little body, wrapped him in the white cloth of our culture, and with Firdaus and Firas, we helped lower him into the ground. There's really no getting over burying someone that you love. It's just getting through it, and it's something that I'm always getting through. From what I just shared with you, I trust it was evident that throughout Hamza's life and death, I felt profoundly isolated. Even in the presence of family and friends, I was alone with my fear, with my grief, and my guilt. And I know now that as a family and as a community, we could have done better. We could have done better for me and for my two other children. Grief is often expected to be carried silently, but when it's shared, it somehow becomes bearable. We all need witnesses in our life. And when that kind of pain is witnessed, it becomes sacred. So I needed witnesses, people who could carry it with me then and now, with compassion and mercy. And, the curse of being perceived as strong is that sometimes people maybe feel a little relieved that they don't have to show up for you. But for this particular community, I hear that MCC actually sends regular updates to you all through email about the people in your community who need witnesses because they're going through some hospitalization. And I hope with the little bits that I shared of Hamza's life that it's resonating with all of you, what the weight of that means, that when someone says so-and-so is in the hospital, there's a whole gamut of experience that comes with that. With all this, obviously, I reflected on faith a lot. Growing up, and I think that this maybe will resonate with something that a lot of you may have experienced, or maybe in the ways that we raise our children. But growing up, whether it was implicit or explicit, I learned that everything in life is either a test or a punishment. And so I grew up for a long time perceiving God as the boogeyman. And I was waiting for the next bad thing to happen to me, the bad person. So when Hamza died, all those lessons collided with unimaginable loss. I felt shame, I felt guilt, I felt I had failed him, and I felt so angry. If you're familiar with Brené Brown, she's done a lot of research on shame. And if you're not familiar with her, please look her up and read some of her literature. It's so beneficial for each of us, but also the children that we raise. Brené Brown, she talks about shame, that feeling of being not enough and inherently flawed. And I realized that my grief was tangled with my shame. Shame for me, for my real and perceived flaws and my failures. Shame for not protecting Hamza. Shame for being part of this world that just felt so unjust. Shame for being so flawed that God gave me a son and then took him from me. Hamza's death forced me to sit with the younger versions of myself, the girl who did the best she could in the environment of the time, with the knowledge and the power that she had at the time. And in these last 10 years, I've visited each of these younger selves since Hamza's death. I've hugged them, I've thanked them, I've loved them, and I've grieved with them for what could and should have been. And I found the knowledge that God does indeed love me. And I'm not in a state of punishment. I'm just a human living a human experience. That's it. There's no judgment in that. And there's no shame in that. Well, good timing. Azan. So thank you for staying with me and coming back after that break. If you're following along with the session guide, I'm on point 4 there with faith and shame. And one of the memories that I can share now, which I didn't for a long time, when I was pregnant with Hamza, I had a recurring daydream. And in it, I was at the cemetery in Phoenix. Now, mind you, I was living in Dubai at the time, so very far from Phoenix. And in this recurring daydream that was very vivid, I was burying the very baby that I was carrying. And each time I had that daydream, the scene shifted a little. Sometimes it rained, sometimes the sun shone, sometimes there were people, sometimes it was just me and the baby. But the two constants that were always the same was there was this dead baby and there was this devastated me in a black dress with white polka dots. I never shared that dream. And especially after Hamza died, I didn't share it. I held it even tighter, wondering, did I somehow make Hamza die? Was this too my fault? The shame weighed so heavily, and it was intertwined with this fear that all 3 of my children were somehow suffering because I was such a bad person. And a couple of years later, I shared this dream with Firdaus in a context-appropriate conversation, and she said to me, as an innocent child does, but Mama, you were wearing polka dots. Your scarf had black and white polka dots on it. And she was right. I hadn't even realized. And that simple acknowledgement lifted some of the weight. And this is where I was saying at the very beginning that when we speak about something, it just really helps, because speaking grief aloud and that dream helped me untangle it from the shame that I was feeling. And of course, I didn't cause Hamza's death. And I knew it as soon as I said it out loud. And that's the antidote to shame. Just say it out loud. So here are some words that I wrote down July 31st, 2015, a few weeks after Hamza's death. I visited Hamza's grave today. As always, I wished I could drive to the hospital instead, just to be near him. The cemetery was far and the heat was intense. There was no one else there, and I felt very alone, empty. I just wanted to know that he was okay. I recited some verses, spoke to Hamza from my heart, and began walking away, telling him I would be back. Between the Arizona heat and my tears, it took me a moment to realize there was a strong perfume scent around me. And after a moment, it dawned on me. It was the musk that we had used to perfume Hamza after washing his body. That scent, that connection, that reminded me that he was still with me in ways that my eyes just couldn't see anymore. And I'll never forget that scent, and it was something that I really needed that day, and I was grateful to God for sending that to me. That day and every day, something that has helped me immensely is talking with my older 2 children, Firdaus and Firas, sharing our grief, our memories, and our love for Hamza together. That is, in fact, where this book, A Flower from You, actually came from. So this book about our loss began as a poem that I had written. And for those who was only 12 at the time, she read it at a memorial at Phoenix Children's Hospital. It wasn't a memorial for Hamza alone. It was for the many children who had passed away there. And it was just such a stark reminder of a reality of hospitals that many of us are shielded from. You know, we bring kids in through the front doors wanting them to be healed, but sometimes some of those kids leave through private back doors and elevators to funeral homes. And so in this audience of parents who had experienced this in families, she was reciting this poem that's in this book now and her own speech. And Firdaus gave grief a voice that day. She spoke it aloud with way more courage than I had. And as Firdaus spoke, I could hear how those words were resonating with the people in the audience around me. And So it became a book, a tangible reflection of my love, of our love, and a reminder for all of us who are grieving someone, something, or someplace. So again, for those reminded me that grief is not only about surviving, but it's about speaking, witnessing, and holding space for each other, like you're doing for me right now, and like she had done with all those parents in that memorial that day. So that's the first book that we had written. There is a second one that's coming out soon, which I'm super proud of. This one me and my kids started writing while Hamza was still alive. And as he was going in and out of the hospital, I obviously noticed the impact it was having on my other two. And so from their experiences, we drafted this book called Buttons and Zippers, a book for brothers and sisters. And so for heart children, the scar that's on their chest is in that community called a zipper. And the premise of the story is that the mom gives this buttons jar to the children, and they can use different color psychology to drop their a button in the jar that reflects a particular emotion that they're going through. And so because my kids were so honest with me about what they were experiencing, each page has a vignette in which, we kind of go over the emotions that they went through, from love to joy to worry and even jealousy. These are things that they experience. And through this work that we did together, we were able to process our grief, and it validated feelings that were very real for them, and gave us an opportunity to talk about it. It reminded us that grief, when it's shared and expressed, it's actually lighter and more human. And Firdaus and Firas have always been and are my loves and my anchors, and I would have floated away so many times if it wasn't for them. My final outlet for creativity has been sketching and painting. I'm drawn to trees, water, flowers. Now, mind you, I'm no trained artist. Stick figures are sometimes the extent of my skill, but the goal is not perfection, it's expression. And so even my stick figures and splashes of paint carry love and honesty. Art has allowed me to express grief, joy, and connection when words fail. It's just a reminder that expression itself matters more than the skill. And so that's where these books came from. And as I mentioned earlier, grief is broader than death, and each of us here today is grieving something at this moment, whether consciously or subconsciously. And please keep in mind, speaking grief aloud is not about attention. It's about love, it's about remembrance, and it's about connection. Not everyone can and will hold space for that, though, unfortunately. But there are people who will. So when you find those people, cherish them, hang on to them, and balance their griefs and hold space for their stories too. So in closing, I just want to ask you to speak. Speak of your loved ones, speak of your pain, speak of your joys, your losses, your regrets. Speak to and for the younger versions of yourself. And if talking to someone isn't your style, or if you have no one to talk to, speak into the empty pages of a journal. Grief is not meant to be carried alone or to be kept inside. Use your words, your art, your poems, your books, whatever gives you voice. Speaking keeps our loved ones alive in our hearts. Speaking pushes shame and guilt to the background, as Brene Brown taught me, and speaking matters. So speak for those that you love. Speak for my Hamza. I know I've shared heavy memories with you today, but this is my truth and it's my story. I also carry lovely memories of Hamza, his beautiful eyes, his sweet hugs, his wise soul, his love for his siblings, and the trust that he had in me as his mother. So thank you for listening and for carrying Hamza's story with me this evening. That's all.
Jazakallah khair. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. We now have questions. Those that are watching online, please type them into the chat box and we will get to them. For those in the room, inshallah, I have a microphone. Just raise your hand and I'll walk over to you, inshallah. And then we'll take those that are watching online. We'll share those too. Just raise your hand, please.
And it doesn't have to be a question. If you want us to hold space for something that you've experienced, that's what we're here for.
Assalamu alaikum. The pain never seems to go away. I'm just so
I hear you, and I see you. Thank you. And you're right. The pain doesn't go away.
Assalamu alaikum. I just wanted to, if you could share, how, the grief from person to person is totally different. And as a mom, it's, that was a lot. So how do you deal with the grief of the rest of the family, as a mom losing a kid?
Like with my living children?
Yeah.
That's a really good question. Oh, sorry. Thank you for reminding me. Honestly, it's honesty. I talk to them. We talk a lot throughout the years. And I think by, just them witnessing us being human helps them. I remember, I'm not going to lie, I went through a lot of depression. I had very, very hard days. And my daughter, she said it so beautifully. Like, she would say, "Mama, you can go to the dark place. You just can't stay there." And that became a saying that we had in our family for a long time. Like, if my son was sad, or not even about grief, about school or something else, it was just, you can go to the dark place. You just can't stay there. You have to come back. And so just being honest in that regard has really been helpful.
I think in our community, there's a lot of cultural that comes before the religion. And, so often we hear platitudes like, "Oh, they're in a better place," or "Don't worry, you could have more children." So how do you deal with the cultural realm where after the loss of a child, that's how you kind of hear that from the community? How do you process that?
Oh, that's a hard one, Monique. Whoever posted that question, thank you for that. I don't have a good answer for that. I can tell you, as the recipient of all those comments, they really hurt. And they are, I know people say it from a place of trying to make someone feel okay, but it's you got to think for a second before you say those things. Like, I had someone say to me, "At least you have 2 other children." And this person had 4. And I was like, "Well, which one would you like to give up then? Because you'll still have 3. And I can't say that I'm always in a place to be able to respond that way. But that one angered me enough to be able to say it. And so I think that the best thing I can say to that, Monita, is, regardless of culture or religion, is just give that person space. You don't have to say anything that will make them feel better, because believe me, there's nothing that anyone can say that will make you feel better. But what you can do is ask, "Tell me about James. Tell me about something about him that you remember. Tell me about their laugh. Tell me about a memory," if they're ready to speak. And if nothing else, just sit with them. One of the hardest things that I experienced after Hamza died was packing up his stuff. I didn't want to go in and have to deal with those. And I have a friend, I don't know if she's online right now. She lives in Arizona. Her name is Safa. And she came to my house with plastic bins, just a whole bunch of them. And she just let me pack. And the most beautiful thing about that was, she didn't make me decide, do you want to keep this? Do you not want to keep this? I didn't have to do that. She didn't ask me anything. She just let me pack those things. That was the most powerful thing that anybody could have done for me at that time, is just let me put everything away and be able to process and deal with it when the time comes. So.
Thank you. And we can remember that our dear Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu, he lost a child as well, and he grieved, and it was very normal of him. Another question online is, how did you overcome the anger you felt and not succumb to your anger, and how did you overcome the anger without feeling guilty? Not sure if that's a clear question.
Anger about Hamza's death specifically. I think one thing that helped me is that I didn't really ask why me when my son was sick? And I know that's kind of a natural thing to ask sometimes when something bad happens to us. So mine wasn't anger about that. It's not something that I could control. My anger honestly came from those younger versions of myself that all I had never dealt with. I didn't have the language or the tools to be able to deal with, and it all just came to a head for me. And then issues that I had within my community or my family or my friend group, those were all tied to Hamza's memories, and I couldn't separate them. That's what made me angry. And I'll be honest with you, like it's taken me a decade to get to a point where I can talk about this without feeling that anger. So it's not something easy. I can't say it's an easy road, and I'm not even sure that I addressed that question. But I would say do the work, give yourself space, find the people and the healers. For me personally, my healers are always authors. I mean, I grew up that way, reading books, and I went back to books as I was trying to figure out my anger and my hurt. And God bless the authors who take their research and their wisdom and put it into the pages of books for the rest of us to benefit from.
We have another question here. This might be a hard one. Is being angry at God, Allah, a sin after my loved one has died? Where do I find the peace?
Wow. I certainly don't have the answer to that, nor am I going to speak from a religious perspective. I don't have that authority. I'll speak from my perspective. And the thing that I made peace with, because remember, in my belief system, God was the boogeyman for a long time. And so how can I even think anything of anger towards God? But at some point, I learned that God actually has thicker skin, if you will, than any one of us. And so if I'm going to be angry and I'm going to be hurt and I am going to cry, I'm going to turn it over to God and I'm going to express it. And I think that is an act of faith. So it's okay to be angry and to turn it over to God and say, I don't know how to process this. I don't know how to hold it and to also hold you. So help me. I don't have an answer other than that. But to turn it over to God, it's okay. I think it's okay. Anger is just a feeling like the rest of them. It's okay to feel it.
Thank you. Another question here. It looks like this is a person who lost a child. I feel there's a story locked inside anyone who has felt this kind of loss, and it just needs to be expressed. What are the best ways to get it out?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, there's so many. I'll share one that I was very surprised by. So I told you art has become a way of finding peace for myself, but it was by accident. My daughter, for those, was going to college 3.5 hours away. So when she came home on a weekend, I wanted to do something different and fun with her. So I thought, let's go to a painting class together. So when we went, we were able to pick these different pictures from books, and the teacher walked us each through it. And when I made mine, and I wish I had put the picture up here I could show you. Remember, I'm the stick figure person. I was blown away. This painting, I just sat and I stared at it. I mean, I created it. Like, that made me so proud that it's something that I could do. But just the colors and the images and everything that came together, there's just such beauty in art. So if you can find that, maybe process in that way. Speaking it, I truly believe that speaking it is so important, but you have to be careful who you speak with, because these stories, they're treasures, you know, and not everybody deserves your treasure. And so just hang on to it until you can find the right people. And that's where the writing really becomes important. And finding, if books aren't your thing, I would encourage you to try to make it your thing, because somebody's already experienced what we have. Like, I know our experiences are unique, but I'm pretty sure what I shared about my life resonated with so many of you in some capacity or another. And there's people that wrote that down. Like, just go read and make their words part of how you sift through your story.
Thank you for that. There's a lot more questions online. Is there any questions in the room here? Okay.
I apologize. I may have missed it, but how old was Hamza?
He was 2 weeks shy of his first birthday. Yeah, so almost one.
Alhamdulillah.
And you didn't miss it. I failed to say it, so thank you. Kind of an important fact, so thank you.
This isn't a question so much as it's more of like just an observation I wanted to point out. I think that's very amazing and special, and just like a testament to how strong of a woman you are, that you were still able to walk your other two kids through the big emotions that they could have and were feeling at the time. I think a lot of times in these situations, people can kind of forget that there's other children involved in this. Is such a traumatic thing for a child to go through, and they're dealing with all these emotions that they might not comprehend, and like for you to be able to take a step back and be able to hold the space for your other two kids to be able to work through their emotions in the long run is going to make them the most emotionally intelligent and wonderful adults. So I think that is a very, very amazing thing that you were able to do.
Thank you. And thank you for saying that. And if you ever get to meet my other two, they are pretty amazing. I'll also kind of resonate on something that just happened. I was very nervous to come and do this talk. I've only spoken once in the decade since Hamza passed away so publicly about this. Firdaus was actually my inspiration. She's very, very courageous and strong. But I got this random message from someone on Facebook, someone I don't know, and he asked me, "Are you the author of A Flower for You?" And I responded and I said, "Yes, I am." And I didn't hear from him for a while. And then he finally did respond. Well, I said, "Yes, I am. Can I ask how you found me?" Because I didn't advertise the book. Like, this is the most advertising that I've done in the time that I've written this. It was truly a passion project for me. And he said that he has a 6-year-old daughter who's going through therapy at Seattle Children's Hospital because her younger brother passed away. So just like you were saying about the siblings, and she was really struggling. And he said, my book was in the waiting room there, and it really resonated with him and his wife. And I was like, first of all, that just gave me so much assurance to go and speak. Like, I don't know who's listening right now and how this may or may not resonate, but like my son Firdaus, when I was texting with him about this, he's just like, "Mama, some random person in Seattle was impacted by this." And so if you know anyone, like these beautiful Palestinian children that are here, and I know that this community's wrapped them in love, but there's a sibling that got the surgery, and then there are the siblings around them, right? So that's another example of someone who's dealing with that. And so we can all show up for them in different ways. I tend to ramble, so you can cut me off anytime. Yeah, okay. You know that, Monique.
Yeah, I do. All right, we have some more questions online. You've resonated here. What is something beautiful you discovered about being a mom of 3, even through all the pain?
Oh, wow. I don't want to sound braggadocious as a parent, because my kids will tell you I've made a lot of mistakes. But they're when I said earlier that they're my anchors, I truly mean that. Like, we called ourselves 3 peas in a pod, because it really was just the 3 of us. Like, we clung together to each other for everything. And so, I mean, the most beautiful thing is when people ask me, how many kids do you have? I have 2 on earth and 1 in heaven. And I think I'm pretty biased here, but I got 3 awesome ones. So they're my friends now. And something that I used to tell them when they were growing up is just to leave the world better than you found it, right? Better than when we were born into it. And that's what they say now. And I can't tell you, like my son, he's 18. He's studying video game design in Arizona, and he had come to visit me, and I was getting him ready to go to the airport to send him back to Arizona. And he was like fixing the bed and stuff and putting it in the sheets and stuff near the washing machine. I'm like, "Honey, you can leave that, where you're going to be late." He's like, "No, Mama, I just want to make it better than I found it." So that just made me so happy, because the lessons that we give them, even when we think they aren't listening, they are listening, and it stays with them. So there's just so many beautiful pieces I could give you about being a parent. It's the biggest blessing. It's such an honor.
questions. There you go.
Thank you for sharing. One of my friend lost her son 3 weeks back.
I'm so sorry.
So, as a community, we are trying to help her. But I'm wondering, the grief will be there. I'm sure it will be there. Some of the coping mechanisms that we listen to her, we are there with her. But some of the coping mechanism that she can hold on, a sibling as well as the mom.
Wow, I'm so sorry for their loss. It's so fresh. Honestly, you said 3 weeks? Yeah, I'm so sorry. 3 weeks is, I wouldn't even think about coping, honestly. I mean, one of the best pieces of advice that I was given and that I would repeat to others is take it just 1 second at a time for your friend. Just make it to the next second, and then make it to the next minute, and then make it to the next day, and you just keep going. And if it takes you, if for the next 6 months you're stuck in just getting to the next minute, so be it. That's okay. But you don't have to think beyond that. Just make it to the next second or the next minute. And then eventually you can make it to the next week and the next month and the next year. It's crazy. There's this book called The Body Keeps the Score. It's amazing. It is so amazing. But the first few years after Hamza's death, his anniversary was very strong for me. Obviously, he passed away in June, but the weeks leading up to it, it would just do something to me and my kids. Like it would manifest physically or in other ways. And at that time, I didn't understand The Body Keeps the Score. I hadn't read that one yet. And so it just pops up in so many different ways. And so the best thing I could say for your friend right now is just to let them feel anything and everything that they want. Help them see that you don't need to do anything more than get to the next second. And with someone that fresh, I wouldn't text them or call them and say, what do you need? Because they don't know. And then that also takes that burden off of you as the asker and puts it on them. Like that's another decision that they have to make at that time. It's another cognitive load for them. So rather than that, just think of all the things that they do need. If they have other kids in their life, they have to get to school. They need lunches. They need clean clothes. A couple of my friends that showed up so good for me in Arizona when this had happened is one of them, she would make lunches for her own kids and then go drop them off in the office at my kids' school so that they would have lunches. So just anticipating what are the things that they need in life anyway, whether it's a grocery run or dinner or laundry or, maybe you could pay for somebody to come and clean their house. So rather than asking, just do the things that they need to make life continue operating when they feel like life stops. I hope that helps. And I'm so sorry for your friend's loss.
We have somebody who's asking, what is your favorite memory of the deceased, Hamza?
Oh gosh, that's a hard one. Honestly, so we obviously weren't allowed to feed him because he had a feeding tube. For those and I who spent the most time in the hospital would try sometimes to introduce flavors to him without, obviously impacting his ability, like causing aspiration or anything. But one of them that I remember is when we put a little taste of Coca-Cola on his tongue. And even Hamza liked soda, apparently, because his eyes just lit up and he was panting and looking around for what this was, and he wanted that soda. And it's just one of those things that we take for granted, just the taste of soda, but there is something addictive. Even Hamza knew that Coke is some good stuff. Thank you for that question.
Any questions in the room here? All right, we'll take some more questions online. Wow, this is a really good one. If you knew that Hamza could drop by and visit you tomorrow, what would be your ideal day spent together?
Oh my God, wow. So this book, if you haven't seen it yet, it's about all the what would have beens in life, right? Like one of them is what colors would you have worn at your graduation and things like that. So for those, Firas and I, we used to have this like little daydream that if we make it to heaven, we're going to ask God for a room with like this huge projector and video screen, and on that we're going to ask God to play for us Hamza's life on this earth with us in it. Like, what would that have been like? And so I think that if I could have any conversation with Hamza, it would be just trying to figure out what would life be like having him there. Because if you read this book, it ends with death being personified. It's this entity that sits with you all the time. And I would just want to know what would life be like without that, and just to have those stories be real.
Okay, we have a
That was
question
a
here.
tough question.
Yeah,
Thank
that was
you.
a good one. Thank you.
Sheesh.
So I'm Hamza's aunt. So I spent a few times with Saeeda in the hospital with Hamza. So it was like really hard for me too to go through seeing him, and especially that first day whenever he got admitted. I just couldn't hold my tears back. So it was really hard. But one thing I wanted to ask Saeeda, like, do you have any kind of like, did you have a lot of dreams after he passed away? And was there any dream that emanated a lot in that till this day you remember? Because I know I had a few dreams of him after he passed away. So just wanted to know if you want to share any ones you had or anything. Kind of.
That's a good question. And first of all, this is my sister Saeeda, and she's a sweetheart if you can't tell. She's a beautiful soul. To be honest, I would like to say that I had beautiful dreams about Hamza, but especially in the aftermath of his death, he did die in my arms, and I have never experienced anything like that before. I didn't know what rigor mortis looks like. I didn't understand what someone's skin starts to look like a few hours after they take their last breath. And so it was very traumatic. And so I think for me, for a long time, the dreams that I would have of Hamza was him in his baby form, but he would look like he did a few hours after his death. And if you've seen anyone after they've passed away, you know what I'm talking about. They're completely gray. So I would like to say that I have other memories, but honestly, I don't. I don't dream about him in that way. But I definitely feel him around me. Shazia, my other sister who's sitting there, that's her cute little baby. And there's just so much of her, and even just in her breathing when I initially saw her, that I was worried that she may have a heart condition or something, God forbid. And poor Shazia went through a whole like scare with that. But I just feel like he comes to me in those ways, not so much in dreams. But I personally, I'm not speaking from a religious perspective, I personally feel like there's more to life than just our physical bodies, and Hamza's still around us in that way. Dreams or no dreams. Good question, though.
There are other questions in the room? I think you might have answered this already, but the questioner is asking, what is the most comforting thing you can say to a person who's lost a loved one to cancer?
Oh, wow. I don't think I could say anything to them to make them feel better. I would just ask them to tell me about the person that they lost, what they remember. People love to talk about someone who's passed away. I mean, I think there's beautiful memories. It's just asking them about those kinds of things. I've got two nurses over here too, and if you want to jump in here, feel free. But yeah, I don't know if that helped.
All right, Sister Victoria.
Victoria.
So I just lost my husband. And one of the things that I do every day is I wonder, what would we be doing today?
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. If I may, I don't know if everybody heard Sister Victoria. She just lost her husband, James, and today would have been their 55th year wedding anniversary, which that in and of itself is amazing. But I completely can resonate with what you're saying. Yeah. I can't even imagine the pain that you're feeling. What would you have liked to do today? Yeah. Yeah.
Just be with him.
Yeah. That's beautiful. Well, I wrote in the book too, I think James and Hamza are both watching us right now. And I think they're happy we met.
Yeah, you've answered all the questions. Are there
Okay.
any more questions in the room? Yeah.
Do you have like any feedback or maybe like some constructive criticism, I guess, that you could give to like the hospital staff? Because I recall you kind of did mention that, you know, and being a medical professional myself, it can be a little bit difficult sometimes to separate the patient from, like you said, the case, because your son isn't just a case, he's your son. What advice would you give to medical professionals that are involved in a situation like that? Like, what do you wish you could have heard from your medical professionals at the bedside when all of this was going on?
Wow, that's a hard one. It's a really good one though. I think it varies. Like I could speak to some of the experiences that I had. The question that someone had posted earlier about the platitudes that we throw out. Believe it or not, I had a nurse that walked in the room and told me, told me that, oh, your son is going to be fine. We see PVS here all the time. And I had joined a mom's page for pulmonary vein stenosis PVS. So I knew that it was a very grim outlook. And so I think being able to step away from the platitudes and also just being honest. Like I got to a point where I got frustrated when they were telling me to be hopeful. Like it's not that I didn't want to be hopeful, but I also didn't want to put my son through another, just very, very difficult surgery. And just to finally, when I did my own research and I sent his case to Boston Children's Hospital, where it's the only center in America that specializes in his disease, was I comfortable enough to know this is really kind of false hope at this point, and I'm not going to put him through any more surgeries. So I think just being realistic is helpful. I don't know if that answered your question.
No, that completely does, and that's interesting that you bring that up, because that is something that I have brought up at work quite frequently as a frustration, that we oftentimes we're not honest with patients and we're not honest with their families. And when we have to have these hard conversations, it's kind of like trying to pass the buck off of like, well, who's gonna break the news to the family? And then when, we are at the bedside having these conversations, like I've even noticed it in my head too. I'm like, this doctor's not like being honest with this patient completely. And I think it's not coming from a place of being deceptive intentionally. Right. I think it's coming from a place of not wanting to further cause emotional harm in such a sensitive situation. But a lot of the times, and I also think this is like a very Western like society thing, like that false positivity and like that hope kind of thing. Yep. And I get it on the one hand, but then on the other hand, I think we need to do a lot better job as a society and as medical professionals and just in general of like being able to hold both truths at the same time, that like you can be honest and have these tough conversations, but then you can also like hold space for that person and allow them to be emotional and allow them to grieve, because sometimes I wonder if they don't want to be honest because they don't want to deal with the emotions that come afterwards, because we're just so scared of shame and grief and everything as a society. Sorry, I kind of went on a tangent there, but
no, I think that's great. And actually you reminded me of a couple things. I did hear many times from medical staff, don't give up. And that kind of, I don't know, feels like a slap in the face a little bit, because it's like I would want to fight more than anybody would want to fight for Hamza, but I also have to balance mercy and being realistic. And honestly, I think the community in the hospital that could really help in that regard is palliative care. We often bring palliative care in when the conversation turns into end of life.
Too
but
late, I
Too
think.
late, yeah. Because they can come in sooner and help families navigate these conversations, but also just comfort care for the patient. Like that's something that could also come up. So involving palliative care sooner would be powerful too.
That's really like good for me to hear this feedback, especially as a medical professional. So that now, like, I'm not working right now, but when I do go back to the ER, I can now, I always knew it in my heart and my gut that was like the right thing to do. But now hearing it firsthand from somebody that's been through it, I definitely can see this helping all of the medical professionals, like in the long run, deal with sensitive situations.
I
like
love
this.
that. Thank you. Thank you. That's a good question. And I know there's some other medical folks here. I'm looking at you. Gonna take those lessons on.
Yes.
Thank you for sharing. How do you respond to questions or comments like, "It's going to be okay"? Sort of. I understand what you're going through.
Mm-hmm.
I find it very hard to sort of. Sometimes I take it with a pinch of salt, but sometimes I'm like, I don't say it out loud.
Right.
Don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, but I'm like, no, you don't know what I'm going through.
Yeah.
Or it's been a few years. My father passed away. I have a very hard time.
Yeah.
It's rough.
No, I get it.
So when people say, I'm right here for you when you want to talk, it's good, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I've found my own way of helping myself
Mm-hmm.
for that, because I don't think my family is wonderful.
Yeah.
I think that some of those comments really get me, like, totally get it.
Yeah.
Or it's been so many years.
Right. Okay, well, I'll remember, I can only talk from my experience, so I'm not saying what I did was right. But for me, my mental health was more important than those people. And so I had a very small group of people that I could even tolerate being around. And so I purposely kept my circle very small and that small circle actually started to dwindle away too, not because anything happened, but they also have lives to get on with, right? And so, and I didn't have, because for me, I'm going to come out with fists up and I'm going to tell you, like, hey, that's really a rude, painful thing to say. Or I'm just going to shut down. And so for me, I just needed a bubble around myself for quite a while till I was strong enough to approach people with compassion and say, hey, maybe you mean well, but that's a really hurtful thing to say. And maybe try reframing it as this, but I'm 10 years out from my loss and I'm finally at a place where I can do that. But you don't have to have a timeline on your grief. And you also, it's not your responsibility to educate people. If you need to take time to process, take as long as you need. And if you need to isolate yourself just a little bit to do that healing, do it, but not to the point where you're completely alone. Don't do what I did. But little bits, and just pick the people around you. It seems like there's a lot of wonderful people in this room that can hold that space for you and make you feel the way you need. And when you're comfortable, teach it to the others that you want in your life. Hey, I need you to show up for me in this way. I hope that helps. Okay.
Okay, one more question here online. This sounds like it's from somebody who lost a child. I think one of the biggest decisions parents of childbearing age face is often whether to have another child. There can be an intense desire to fill that emptiness created. However, no child can ever replace another child. What do you do if parents have conflict on whether to have another child while one parent wants it and the other does not? That's a tough one.
Oh, that is a tough one. And I'm definitely not going to pretend that I have an answer to that. But I will say from reading the stories of others who've been in this sort of situation, the way that men and women grieve is very, very different. And as a culture, I think, regardless of religion or anything, we give women more space to grieve than we do men. And in fact, I never got this far yet, but with this book, if you notice, it's a mom's silhouette throughout this book. But I would very much like to reprint the same exact story with a father's silhouette in here. Not because of my ex-husband, that's a whole nother story, but because men and women do grieve so differently. And so to this person, what I would say is, I think therapy is a great place to start processing that separately and together. I think that the husband in this situation, or the father, probably needs a space to have their own conversations and figure it out, because your timelines of grief and the ways you respond and cultural expectations on men and women are so different with grief that there's some of those things to sort through before we even get into a decision of, do we have another child? But that's just my humble opinion. That's a tough and very personal, question.
I think this is the same person asking this question. We found it meaningful to donate some of the child's clothing and possessions to a pediatric ward and other charities. We just don't want their possessions, I think, child's room and possessions to become a museum or shrine, which can never be changed or moved. How do we balance that with the need to remember, with the need to move on?
Oh, that's a good one. I really like that question. So, I mean, I dealt with the same thing. I've done several cross-country moves in the last several years, and I have to be honest with you that I've dragged a lot of Hamza's stuff with me from state to state. I still have some of those plastic bins that Safa had filled with me, and they still have his stuff. I've let go of some things, but I personally will not let go of everything, because I don't get to go buy him new clothes, and I don't get to go buy him new toys and things. And so I do cling to those, and I'm going to probably cling to them until I die. And I have no shame or problem with that. So, but yes, to your point, I don't think it's healthy to have this mausoleum resurrected to the children, but you take as long as you need. And one thing that I did in my house is I set up a memory wall for Hamza. And so if you want, you can reach out to me and I can share pictures of it. But I bought these picture frames that I could put his pictures in them, but they close. And so on the outside, there's just this pretty like art piece. So I can open it when I want, but he's also very much a part of my world and my life. And so if someone walks into my home, they're going to see that. Whether it makes them comfortable or not, it doesn't matter to me, because he's always going to be a part of my life. And it's not a room set aside, but it is definitely what we call Hamza's wall. So I do have a memory wall, but that's such a personal decision for each person. Like, you have to just make a decision for yourself at one point, but you don't have to decide right now. I think that decision fatigue and that cognitive load is one more thing to process. So process it when you're ready to process it. That's a really good question. For those, if I could recap, like the sister's asking, there are some who will say, let faith be what heals you and your grief, and then, others believe in therapy. I'm going to, again, speak from my perspective only, but I think that to put that burden on someone to say faith is going to heal you is so unfair, because it doesn't mean that person doesn't have faith. I say this from personal experience, because I had many instances like that put towards me that added to my shame, that maybe I'm not faithful enough, that maybe I'm just not good enough a Muslim to be strong enough or whatever. That is not true at all. Like, I can tell you that there's just absolutely no truth in that. Everyone will deal with things differently. If faith is enough for someone, great, more power to you. But if someone needs therapy, absolutely nothing wrong with that. Some people will go to traditional talk therapy and just tell the same story over and over and over. And God bless the therapist who sits there and listens to that. That's what that person needs. I did talk therapy, but I also did 2 other ones that helped me a lot. One is EMDR therapy, That just really helped with the intensity of Hamza's death, to the point where I didn't go into a grocery store and just start crying for no reason. Like, that's how I was processing it for years. And it was embarrassing to my other children too. So I did that. I also did hypnotherapy, because a lot of what we process with our traumas are under the surface, right? Like, what is it, 90% or so of what we process is under the surface. And so I think it's such an individual choice. And this is one of those things that makes me angry. And if I hear it around me, it's one of those things that I will push back on, because that's judging somebody else's faith. It doesn't mean that they don't have faith in God if they go and seek help. That's just humans. Like, we come to a mosque and we connect with people because that is what we do as human beings. We need connection. And so if that comes in the form of therapy and that's what someone needs, more power to them. Yeah, of course. Good question.
Okay, this question I'm not really understanding, but I think I'm going to try to summarize it. They're talking about the siblings being kind of the forgotten mourners, and they're just forgotten. I think that they're just dealing. How do you kind of deal with the sadness and depression? Because in the culture, I think this person is saying they just the indication is, let's not talk about this, sweep it under the rug with the siblings, and we'll kind of forget about this child ever existing.
Ooh, that's a good question. I'm going to speak from very personal experience with this one, because, like I said, my children, they talk to me, so I know the things that hurt them. And so after Hamza passed away, I had a well-meaning person come to my house, and well, actually, many people told my kids this, that you need to be strong for your mom. No. That is such a big burden for a child to carry. They don't need to be strong for me. So I would think that what we can do is, and I hope that you'll read Button's, I can't even think anymore, the other book that I'm going to have come out. If you can read that, whoever has that question, that very much puts the spotlight on the siblings. And it gives them language to speak about things. And I think sometimes that is all they need, is permission to speak. For those in Fiddasan, I told the child life person at Hamza's hospital about the story, Buttons and Zippers, that we wanted to write. She said that it's very powerful, not just for the kids, but for the parents, because the parents themselves cannot articulate what they're feeling, let alone help their children through it. So if you can find some sort of vehicle to give them space to start talking about it, that would be wonderful. And then let the kids lead the way. Because my kids, for example, there were times where they led with their identity of, I lost my brother. And then there were other times that they didn't even want to tell anyone that they had a brother. And they're in different spaces with that, and that's okay. Let them lead their emotions and just be ready for them. And that's such a beautiful question. I'm so glad you asked it. And I could talk more and more about siblings, but I know we're probably way over on time. But reach out to me. I'm happy to talk about it more with you, whoever had that question.
Okay. Any more questions from the room? MashaAllah. Thank you. All right.
Thank you.
May Allah bless you. Thank you for sharing your story and the insights, and may Allah bring ease to all the hearts of parents who have suffered, who have gone through this experience. It's probably one of the hardest tests you go through, and all we can do is provide our empathy and sympathy towards it. But thank you for the courage to put it on paper so we can actually be a part of that. And Jazakallah khair.
Thank you. Thank you for holding space with me.
Yeah, and the books are available here if you like, and then I think they're on Amazon as well.
Yeah, so we had some technical difficulties through Amazon. So those who are online, there are some surveys that you could fill out to let me know that you're interested in the books. And as soon as I get it resolved with Amazon, I'll send that to you. And then the other thing is I'm going to have a launch party for the other book about the brothers and sisters. And I would love if you would be a part of that, because a launch party just means that we will all flood Amazon at the same time during this 1 hour, 2 hour window you don't even have to buy the book. Just go to the site for it, because it helps rank the book higher, and hopefully other people who are searching for support for siblings will then come across the book. And so, yeah. Thank you, everyone.
Hopefully we can be a part of that launch party. Jazakallah khair. May Allah bless you. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.